and we're excited about having Handsome Ransom Jackson with us on our phone lines right now. The book is called Accidental Big Leaguer, Handsome Ransom Jackson. So, Handsome, what do you want me to call you, Handsome or Ransom? What are you most comfortable with on the radio?
I believe Ransom. I think I've outgrown the Handsome.
I don't know. I'm sure other people would. I think people would disagree with that and say you're still as handsome as ever.
Well, 90 years old? Good gosh. I'm just about the same, I guess. You call me what you want.
Let's put it this way, Ransom. You're first off, I got the book Friday, had a chance to read a little bit with you and also Galen H. White, your co-author on this. I've got to ask you, with the kind of career you had and the stories you have, how come it took you this long to put your autobiography together?
Well, of course, I learned a lot of things after I got out, things that I had done. Back then you didn't keep up with all that stuff. I didn't know I was at the last Brooklyn Dodger home run for 25 years after I got out. Things like that. And then all my golfing buddies I'd tell them stories, and they'd say, "Why don't you write a book?" And my kids and grandkids would say, "Grandpapa, why don't you write a book about all these stories?" I'd say, "Oh yeah, any day." So a couple years ago, I sat down and started out. I got a big pack of yellow legal pads, and I filled up 4 legal pads. That's 78 times 4. And I gave them to my wife, and she typed them up. And then we looked at each other like, where do you go from here? And then I bumped into Galen White, who had just written a baseball book about a friend of mine I played with in spring training by the name of Steve Bilko. Great book. Mm-hmm. He was the Babe Ruth of the Pacific Coast. And we just gelled, and he was probably the best writer I ever bumped into. And he would take a paragraph of mine, turn it into 5 paragraphs. Just great. And we put it all together, and he said, "Well, I'll try my publisher first." And I don't know. I didn't know anything about publishing books. And so the publisher got it, and I think about less than 2 weeks later, they came back and said, "We want it." So, I understand that's pretty quick.
Very quick.
So here it is.
Yeah. Well, I love it. First off, the book is published by Rowman and Littlefield, and it's a hardcover book that's goes about 262 pages, which is also available not only in the hardback, but you could also pick it up on ebook as well. The website, Rowman.com, for those of you interested, Rowman and Littlefield, Rowman.com. I'm sure you could probably find it everywhere, Amazon, Barnes & Noble. Have you developed your own website? Do we have RansomJackson.com?
HandsomeRansomJackson.com.
I love it. So you see, you didn't drop the Handsome.
Still there.
You still have it for your website. That's exactly right.
We found out there was a website called Ransom Jackson.
Wow.
I had never heard of. So we had to we threw the Handsome in just for kicks.
Hey, this is crazy, but, when I was reading about your football career, first at TCU and then at Texas, it seemed like the perfect storm. And what I mean by that, Ransom, it was the time of the war. You were wanting to get involved with the Navy, and just because they were, it seemed like shorthanded some personnel at the times at TCU when you first got started, they kind of asked you to try out and come by and see how things work, and sure enough, it worked into a nice career for you as a college football player.
Well, I was in the Navy officer training program at the time at TCU. They sent me to TCU, my first stop. And I had never played in high school. We didn't have it. It was during the war, first part of the war. So they stopped at high school. They stopped everything. And so I didn't play any sports, just pickups. And I got over there at TCU, and we got up at 5:30 in the morning, and we studied all day long. Went to classes all day long. We were in the Navy making $50 a month, and if you flunked one course, you were gone. And so I was just out there watching them play football one day, practice, and the coach, who is in the Hall of Fame, Dutch Meyer, called me over and said, "Son, you want to come out?" And I said, "Coach, I'm in the Navy. I don't have time." he said, well, we need people. We don't have very many. And I said, well, okay. So I went out, and he said, what do you play? I said, well, I never played. He said, well, I put you with a lineman. Well, I was 6'1", 165. That's a good size for a lineman. And after the first practice, I said, Coach, I am not a lineman. So anyway, we start the season. First game against Missouri, I was the punter, and I kicked, I think, 5 balls out of bounds inside the 10-yard line and was the star. But long story short, we won the Southwest Conference with 15 guys. We were called the 15 Fighting Frogs. And then we go to the Cotton Bowl on New Year's Day and barely got beat by Oklahoma A&M 44-0. And then and then the Navy closed up, and they sent me down to University of Texas. I was still in the Navy, of course. And the coach down there, Dana X Bible, comes to me and said, I saw you play. He wants you to come out. And I said, Coach, good gosh, I got Navy courses. I was taking 3 Navy courses and 3 other courses. And I said, okay. He said, we got a pretty good quarterback coming back. We want you to, and we think we'll do good this year. His name is Bobby Lane. And I said, oh, well, all right. So I go out, and we won the Southwest Conference again with Bobby Lane passing. So I got to play 2 straight Cotton Bowl games for 2 different teams. It's kind of unusual, but it can't be done today. But I could do it back then because I was in the Navy.
Well, you're the first and only player to do that, so congratulations to have that distinction. And then you somehow, after your college football days were over, parlayed that into a professional baseball career that led you to Wrigley Field and the Chicago Cubs in the early 50s.
Well, back in those days, I was just jogging along, and I'd finished. All of a sudden, I was getting out of college, and I looked at myself in the mirror, and like, what do you do? And so a coach comes by. Because I led the Southwest Conference and hit him for 3 straight years. This guy comes by and taps me on the shoulder and says, you want to play pro baseball? I said, I don't know anything about it. I could not tell you the name of one professional baseball player in the big leagues. I said maybe Babe Ruth, but that's about it. And he said, well, we'll fly you up to Chicago and you can try out. So I flew up, tried out, hit some balls in the seats, and they called me in there and said, we're going to offer you a contract. And I said, oh, really? I never had a contract in my life. And he said, we're going to give you a 2-year major league contract, which means you're on the major league roster and you get to come to spring training with the big boys. And he said, we're going to pay you $6,000 a year. And I said, my God, that much money. And so I signed it real quick. And that's how I started. And, of course, we made the big money back in those days. There was no doubt about that. That was the minimum major league salary.
Wow.
And throughout the 50s. And I'm sure you know what the minimum now is.
Now, I think the last I checked, it was a little over 500,000, isn't it?
I think it's 560.
Yeah.
And the most I ever made in the big leagues, it was 2 AllStar games and World Series, was 21.
Well, 21 grand was still probably not bad money at all in the mid-50s.
Well, I think today it was about 90,000.
Well, okay. So, yes, it was.
But that's the story of my life, my baseball career, and I'm sticking with it.
There you go.
But I met so many guys. I was played with so many guys, and they're probably 90% of them are not with me anymore.
I know it.
But I've got these stories, and it was just between me and them, me and Yogi Berra, me and so-and-so, and if I don't tell them, nobody else is going to tell them. There won't be anybody here. So that's what most of the stories are about. Guys that are long gone and what happened between me and them.
All I know is this. You made your first All-Star team, I believe, in 54, correct?
Yeah.
And I've looked at that National League All-Star team in 54, and it was a loaded All-Star team. Matter of fact, you look at the roster, Duke Snyder, Warren Spahn, you've got Campy, you've got Erskine from Brooklyn, you've got Gil Hodges, Willie Mays, Stan Musial, Pee Wee Reese, Jackie Robinson, Ted Klaczewski, who was a monster of a first baseman for the Reds back in the 50s. You were, telling you, you had a really nice group that you were with that first year.
And I got them all to sign a ball, and the ball died. The signatures faded away, so it was worth $1.98, I guess. I hated it.
Here's the good news. The good news is there's still some of those balls that exist that are in good condition. The problem is you might have a hard time paying $1.98 for one now, even if you tell them you're Handsome Ransom.
Oh, if I'd saved all my signatures and everything, my batting coach was a guy named Rogers Hornsby, and all these people.
Wow.
I bumped into. They just, I didn't think about autographs or getting people to sign it. And that was just dumb on my part. But
now, the first All-Star game you played in was in '54 in Cleveland. You went back the following year to Milwaukee in County Stadium in that one. And do you consider now, you did a lot. You played in Chicago. You were a power-hitting third baseman with the Cubs in those the mid-'50s, right around the time that Ernie Banks was breaking into the game as well with Chicago. And then you go to Brooklyn the year after they win the World Series, and suddenly you're there as the eventual replacement of Jackie Robinson, who was at third base at the time. And that first year in Brooklyn, you end up getting into the starting lineup a little bit later in the year, but you go to the World Series that year, playing the Yankees, and that was the year that Larson had the perfect game. So
how about that one?
Unbelievable. And that's what I was going to ask you. The years in Chicago were great for you because you were an All-Star twice and you were averaging about 20 home runs a game. But when you compare the personal success you had in Chicago with that first year in Brooklyn and going to the World Series with the Dodgers, how would you kind of rank the two?
Well, of course, every ball player, if he's got any sense at all, would want to play in a World Series and then want to play in an All-Star game. And they can get out of baseball saying they did want both of those. And I'd played in 2 All-Star games, and I never figured Chicago was always a second division team. I never figured we'd go to the World Series. And when a sports writer friend of mine called me one night in Chicago while I was in Chicago and said, "You've been traded," I said, "You're teasing." He said, "No, you've been traded for 3 guys." And I said, "To who?" And he said, "Guess." I said, "Don't do that to me." "Tell me." He said, "No, you got to guess." I said, "Cincinnati." "Nope." "Pittsburgh." "No, you've been traded to the Dodgers." And I said, "You are full of it." What a thrill going from last place to first place. And I'd played against all these guys for 5.5 years. I knew what they, were capable of, what kind of team. And the Cubs never had anything like that. And so to go from the Chicago Cubs, although I loved playing in Wrigley Field, it was all-day games. Mm-hmm. I loved that. But what a thrill to go over and play with all these guys who I didn't idolize, but I respected so much. With the Cubs, we had a couple of good players here and there. But with the Dodgers, you're looking at every guy who walks out there.
That's right. And, you saw just a loaded team. Now, it's funny because, if I'm not mistaken, you had a 2-0 lead in that series, did you not? You won the first 2 in Brooklyn.
Which was...
In the 56 World Series.
Yeah, won the first 2, yeah.
Right, you won the first 2, and then the Yanks came back and beat you twice at Yankee Stadium. Then they beat you also in Game 5. You won in Brooklyn in 10, 1-0 in Game 6, and that led to the Game 7.
Yeah, they beat us in 7 games, and after that we went over to Japan for a month, which was beautiful. Tell
me about that, because that's the story that people don't know.
We just all piled in a plane and left after the game, the last World Series game, and we flew over there. And my roommate was a guy you might have heard of, Don Drysdale. Mm-hmm. You ever heard of him?
Sure. Well,
he was my roommate over there for a month, and we had a great time. And we played were supposed to play 20 games, but we ended up playing, I think these 17 or 18 got rained out. But the fans were great. They had confetti. Every town we went to, we'd go down the middle of town and with confetti coming out of all the buildings, and of course, all the stands were full, and just had so much fun. Drysdale had a hard time with the Pullman coaches. He was 6'6". They did not quite fit him. I laughed at him. He couldn't get comfortable. But we played in all. We played in, of course, Japan has 4 islands. We played in every island. We were coming to Hiroshima, and they told us to, we got in there late in the afternoon. They said hang around the hotel. There's still animosity around, so we did. And I walked up to a couple of the people who worked there in the lobby, behind the desk and so forth. I said, "Where were y'all when the bomb went off?" And they said, "We were up in the mountains." And they said that the Americans dropped leaflets a week or so before the bomb went off about something terrible was going to happen.
Wow.
Everybody go up into the hills. And he said, my family and lots of other families went up in the hills. I said, I did not know that. I'd never heard of that. And so I've told that story to every speech I've made. And I was making a speech down in Savannah, and a little guy came up to me. He was about 75 years old, and he thanked me for telling that story. He said I was a gunner on one of those planes, and he had tears in his eyes, and I was so moved by that.
Well, what's amazing is a lot of us, I never heard that story either. I had no idea that they actually gave advance warning a week out before that happened.
Yeah, it really happened.
Wow. We're talking right now to Handsome Ransom Jackson, accidental big leaguer. The book with Galen White is available right now on hardback or ebook. For more information, you can go to Roman.com. That's ROWMAN for RomanandLittlefield.com for Handsome Ransom Jackson. I'm curious, before we wrap things up, you played really for two of the great franchises in the game, but playing for the Cubs when they were in last place in those years, and then going to Brooklyn where the Dodgers were on the way out, and I heard that attendance in 57 was really not good at all because the fans kind of knew what was coming. Was that a little tough for you? Because everybody talked about Ebbets Field and what a great place it was to watch, to play baseball in front of the fans, but it had to be a different time then because of the Dodgers going to L.A.
Well, of course, we didn't find out. I mean, we as the players did not find out till October of that year when the season was over. I did not know anything about it. And I think some of the fans, it was in the paper, there was probably negotiations going on, but I did not know anything about it as a player. And when I was, after the season, I saw in the paper that the Dodgers were moving to L.A., and I said, man, they didn't tell me. Of course, why would they? But I think that the fans in Brooklyn kind of felt it was coming, or for some reason, I don't know, but I never even knew about it or felt it at all. So, as I said, it was a complete surprise to me, but it turned out to be the greatest thing for the franchise that there was, because they start the Brooklyn field will only hold 35,000.
Right. Did you have a better time in Brooklyn or in Chicago?
Well, I think Chicago. Brooklyn, I'd just get on the subway, go to the park, come out, get on the subway, and come back, and then sleep and get up the next day and do that. In Chicago's wide open. I had a lot more friends in Chicago. It was just easier. I'd stick around after the games talking to the fans, because it was 4 o'clock, 4:30. What do you do? And so it was just more casual, and just a lot more fun playing in Chicago. I think mainly because of the day games.
Folks, you want to read more? You can check out the book, Handsome Ransom Jackson, Accidental Big Leaguer. This tweet came in a moment ago on Twitter from Gabriel Sanchez at Minor Gabe. Wow, I wish I sound like that when I'm 90. Just wow, handsome. So congratulations. You're already making an impression on
Where do
our
I
listeners.
spend the money?
Yep. I know it. Hey, do me a favor. Since since we're up against the break, let's get you back on. I want to do this again with you, and if you don't mind, we'll get you back on here in the in the next few weeks because I'd love to give you more time and have you tell some more stories.
Well, by that time, you will have read the book and know all the stories.
Well, there might be new stories that I can ask you about that aren't in the book that I can try to guess.
There were some stories I had to delete.
Well, then those will be some of the stories we'll talk about.
No, I can't do that.
I understand. Ransom, it's really been a pleasure having you on the show. We appreciate the time so much.
Steve, thank you so much. I appreciate that.
It's Handsome Ransom Jackson, folks, as we continue on Sports Talk.